we say we're more agile, we say we're more customer-centered, we say we're digital, but we're not really. All right, all we've done is we've changed the language, but not the action. And I see people being sheep. So when people are just copying each other, so when you say, as a business or as an individual, I'm going to do this because everybody else is doing it. I think lots of leaders feel embarrassed that they sort of missed out on asking some of the questions that they needed to have asked. People say that change has never been faster than it is now. I'm not sure that's true.
Has technology failed us? How can we build genuinely human-centric organizations? Join me as I talk to Jonathan Briggs, who has been at the forefront of digital transformation, championing the use of technology to drive innovation and change in education. Jonathan, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Welcome to the talk show.
Thank you.
Very good. So let's start our conversation. Today we're going to talk about human-centric organizations. And I think a good place to start is about understanding a bit of the context. So technology has been developing very, very, very fast. There has been a lot of promises. I think it would be nice to understand from you what has been happening and where did we get it wrong?
So as you probably know, I've been working with technology and helping people understand technology for over 30 years. So don't think there's one point where we got it wrong. I think there are many opportunities to change direction and we haven't. I started 30 years ago thinking about how the merger between television and telephones and computers, what we then called multimedia, what that was going to mean to businesses, to marketing, to all sorts of things. I suppose I still do the same today. The only difference is we're now talking about ChatGPT, we're now talking about generative AI, we're talking about the Internet of Things and all sorts of other things. So the technology's changed, but helping humans, helping companies, helping individuals to make sense of it all, that hasn't changed. That's still that's what I started doing. That's still what I do.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit more. How did everything started like 30 years ago?
So if we go back 30 years, what I was doing was I was teaching artificial intelligence. And you might be surprised by this, but at the end of the 80s, the money for artificial intelligence ran out. Governments around the world decided that we weren't going to make significant moves in artificial intelligence. And therefore, the money was turned off. And if you were teaching in a university, as I was, courses about artificial intelligence went from, yay high, everybody's interested, to suddenly, nobody's interested. So I decided I would change my focus and I moved towards multimedia. I moved towards this thing that seemed to be coming down the road, which said, when you have phones that are also televisions, that are also computers, all sorts of things will happen. There was a big problem, which is that, or normally when you're an academic, you are, you're teaching a body of work that exists. If you're a chemistry teacher, there's 200, 300, 400 years of chemistry you can teach. Well, there wasn't 200 years of multimedia. So I started an agency in order to start doing multimedia as well as teaching about it. So I kept my job and I was doing both. And I suppose that has guided everything that I've done, which is to mix up teaching about things and training people and working with people in development contexts and actually building stuff and making things work and those sorts of things as well.
And what drives you?
Oh, learning. I mean, if I was told I wouldn't learn anything new today, I wouldn't get up in the morning. So every morning I get up and I feel energized by the idea that something's going to surprise me today. Something's going to cause me to write a little note down or whatever it is. But I'm a learner. That's what I do.
And along these 30 years, maybe you can share what has been one of your biggest mistakes and what have you learned from it?
I think it's a mistake I probably haven't learned from, but it's to keep doing something for too long. So it is it's to get stuck in a rut. And I've recently left a job I loved, but I should have done earlier. I should have moved on sooner, because I think that it is really easy for the environment around you to sort of solidify and to start to stop you from innovating and thinking and whatever. And I think that's what happened. And it's happened a couple of times before, so I'm saying I'm not necessarily learning about it. But no, I think that's probably the biggest mistake, is keeping going with something which probably should be, should be allowed to go.
And if we look at today what's happening in tech, maybe we can discuss a little bit about myths. What are some of the misconceptions and myths that you are observing today?
I think if I look at today's sort of landscape, I think there are lots of things that seem to be going wrong, or they seem not to fulfill the vision that we might have had 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I think the first thing that I observe a lot is that people have stopped wondering what's going on behind the scenes. So they've assumed that what they see is what they get and will be what they get forever. So a good example would be Google search. People imagine that the search problem is solved. Search has gone away. We don't need to worry about it anymore because Google solved it. I think that's a great mistake, because I think that although I think Google search was fantastic, I'm not so sure now, because it's now full of content that it has been produced by bloggers and spammers and other sorts of people. It's much more difficult today to get your questions answered well than it was. So that's the sort of myth that I think we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves the same sort of myth about social media. Oh, it's all solved. We've got the TikToks, the Instagrams, and the Facebooks of the world. That's what social media means. And because people accept what we've got and don't demand better and don't think about how we might improve things, I think sometimes we get stuck, and that's a great pity.
I can see your passion in this topic. So maybe you can tell us about, so what really breaks your heart when you look at what's happening?
When I see people being sheep. So when when people are just copying each other. So when you say, as a business or as an individual, I'm going to do this because everybody else is doing it. Not because you've worked out that this is the right thing to do for your business, or for yourself, but because you've just seen, we're following the herd, we're doing the same thing everybody else. I think that's the thing that's saddest. I also, if we look at what's happened in the last, 6, 7, 8 years, tech has got harder again. Although it sometimes, it seems easier, it's partly because we're focusing on the wrong things. If you look, for example, at the complexity of supply chains, how do you get the raw materials to become products, to become things that people want to buy, and the whole journey from wherever something is made or grown or whatever, through to the finished product and then into the stores and into my home. That's a hugely complex job. And we just assume it's somebody else's problem. And I think one of the most interesting things recently was working for Moet Hennessy. I was working on a project, a digital transformation project with them, and just beginning to understand the complexity of their business, about all the choices that are made all the way through, about moving bottles of champagne or bottles of cognac through their business. It's much more complicated than it looks. And yes, digital can help, but it was just fascinating to see the complexity and to begin to understand how something you might do at the growing stage or at the production stage might then have an effect when you then want to sell it in store or whatever. Very interesting.
So that takes me to the thought what you were saying before about like technology was supposed to solve problems and came with promise. But then, as you're saying, that maybe a few things went wrong. Where did things went wrong?
I think we overestimate constantly the impact of any particular technology. So when you see a new technology, everybody rushes towards it. Whether it is a technology like the web or a technology like e-commerce or advertising, digital advertising, we all rush towards it. In the long term, we're probably right to do so, but we get disappointed at some stage in that process. I was watching a YouTube video recently about what happened during COVID about e-commerce, and you can see obviously people moved to e-commerce, and there was lots of people out in the market saying yes, the high streets will never be the same again, and people are going to remain committed to e-commerce for the rest of all time. Well, actually, of course, once COVID finished, people rushed back into stores, they rushed back into the high streets, they rushed back into malls, because I actually think humans want human experiences. Now that doesn't say, and I'm not saying, that e-commerce is now therefore not going to be important. What I'm saying is that the balance between offline and online will continue to change. And there'll be some categories of product where it makes absolute sense to be buying online. But there'll be other categories of product where experiencing the product, experiencing the thing. Same in education, all right? There'll be times when you'll want to go online and watch a video, or you'll take a test, or you'll read something, and that's exactly the right thing. But there must be times when you'll want to get together with a group of people in a place and have an experience. Last week I was in Kuala Lumpur working with Coca-Cola, and it was a fantastic training experience, not just for the people who we were training, 200 of the smartest leaders for the Coca-Cola brand, but also for those of us who were participating, because it really showed the power of being somewhere and doing things together, and that was thrilling. It was really, really exciting, because we had it was a group of people who put together an experience for the leaders, and I think we did a good job. It was good. It was fun.
So you speak a lot about getting a balance.
Yeah.
So how do you think companies today can strike that balance?
I think that every leader needs to take responsibility for their own digital mindset. And what I mean by that is, it's not something you can ask somebody else to do. You can't go to your digital transformation person or your IT team or your head of marketing and say, you need to think about the digital future of our company. You need to do it yourself. And I think everybody needs to do it at all levels of an organization. Think about bringing what's happening out in the world into their jobs and into their lives. I think there are several parts to that. I think the first thing is that people need to be more aware of what is going on. They need to sense the world better. And once they do sense things, once they see something, oh, ChatGPT has just arrived. Oh, there's a new version of Midjourney. Oh, there's something new happening in IoT. As soon as they've seen that, they need to start asking themselves some questions. What's going on behind the scenes? How does this work? Why is it free? Who owns it? Where's the data going? How am I? So you need to ask lots and lots of questions and not just take it at face value. I think the second thing you need to do is then say, and how is it relevant to me? What's it going to do for my work? What's it going to do for my team? What's it going to do at home with my kids? So actually translating from noticing something in the world to asking questions about something in the world, to then trying to actually think about how it relates to me. Often, that will require you to immerse yourself in that particular technology or that particular idea. And that means making something yourself. It means actually building something, prototyping it. Yeah. So, if you hear about a new technology, if you hear that AR or the metaverse or some gaming technology is going to be really important, I think you've got to open your laptop and download the software and go and try it so that you are then slightly more informed so that you can start to think, well, I wonder what that actually means for me.
And where do you think leaders or companies are struggling in that process that you just shared?
I think lots of leaders feel embarrassed that they sort of missed out on asking some of the questions that they needed to have asked. Yeah. I think the higher you rise in an organization, the more, particularly in Asia, you don't want to lose face. And asking questions, particularly what look like stupid questions. I mean, asking people, how does a search engine work? Or, that Google traffic thing, how does that actually work? I think many people get frightened that it's too late to ask. Something's been around for 10 years and I can't ask. Well, I think they have to ask. I think they have to turn their lack of knowledge into questions. And I think many companies, when you see digital transformation working, it's because the leader is actually showing bravery, they're showing curiosity, they're showing leadership. They don't know it all, they don't know what's going to happen. And they're moving towards being more experimental, trying things out. They're taking people with them. They're talking to people across the organization, trying to make sense of what is going on. And I think that's the good people are doing that. And that's what we need more of.
Maybe do you have any example of any either a company that you saw is doing really well there, or any customer that you were working with?
I think the company I got very close to and really enjoyed working with over very many years was Unilever. And I think the leadership team at Unilever were very much setting the standard. There wasn't a sort of hierarchy of knowledge where the people at the top knew everything and the people at the bottom knew nothing. It's absolutely the opposite way around, where there was a sort of curiosity and vulnerability at the top, and people would ask questions and they get people involved. And a lot of the training we did with Unilever was about bringing together groups of people and giving them the opportunity to explore things together. Another organization we worked with a lot was DBS. And I think DBS was magnificent in taking leaders through immersive experiences in which they would create something, they'd make a prototype. So don't just think about design thinking, do design thinking. And not just do design thinking with the people at the bottom of your organization. Get the senior leadership team to build something, to hack something, to make something. That's what really needs to happen.
I love that, about make them do things.
Yeah.
Let's go a bit deeper on this. Like, how can people do that?
I think one of the things that digital has provided is better tools than we've ever had before. So I think that most companies, the problem is not the technology, the problem is not the ideas, the problem is making space for it. And I think we need to find ways of saying, look, the investment in raising the level of digital awareness and digital mindset in the organization that investment is so worthwhile. And that means putting aside some time. And one of the things I do in my life is to try and make sure that I have blocks of time in my diary where I cannot be disturbed, because my job is to learn something that I will then use in the rest of my life. And I've done that for many years. It is making time for myself. So I at the moment, I like everybody else, I've been exploring some of the generative AI and things like ChatGPT. And I want to get good at writing prompts. I want to see how I can use it in my lesson planning, in my workshop activity. And it's interesting because I'm not passing the job to ChatGPT. What I'm doing is using it as a colleague to think with. I'm challenging ChatGPT, and I'm hoping to be challenged back by what I see and what I read, and it's great.
So now that you touched about ChatGPT, I think it's a good moment to discuss about it. So ChatGPT is disrupting a lot of industries. I'd like to push you to tell us, like, what are some of the effects in the future that maybe people are not even dreaming or thinking about of AI?
I mean, I think that the idea of having an intelligent assistant, the idea that every one of us is going to be able to hire for $20 a month someone to help us think, is amazingly powerful. Yes. All right. So I see my opportunity to be 1.5x or 2x in terms of my productivity and my ways of thinking. The big danger comes if we imagine that ChatGPT is going to replace people. It might. I mean, I think used poorly, I think it probably will. But I think a much better way of thinking is how do we help people be more effective at what they do? To look at different perspectives, to draw on more cases or more history or other things that have happened. I think if we get into the habit of going and asking an AI to consider a problem that we're trying to solve, but seeing it as an assistant and not as taking over that decision making, I think that's going to be the best way of using it.
So then you touch about, so there will be gains in productivity. It's basically it's going to change.
There could be.
Yes.
I don't think I'm going to guarantee there's going to be improvements in productivity. Also, we have to remember that every technology we've developed so far, you get unintended consequences. So things always occur which create problems for the world. We've got to be ready for those problems. We've got to be able to do that. I'm not about putting genies back in bottles. I don't think it works. But I think what we need to be aware of is that the consequences of the actions we take now are not going to be predictable. And that's going to be part of what we have to live with.
Yeah, maybe can we dive into what do you think are going to be some of that consequences?
So one of the things we could do is see a situation in which some jobs disappear. Maybe some of the sort of creative jobs will disappear. We won't need people to do illustration or whatever because we'll be able to get AI to do those things for us. But I think that what we need to do is find ways of helping real illustrators become better illustrators. We need to see this as adding value to people rather than replacing people. And it's a hard challenge. I was just thinking through some of the things that we might be able to do differently. I think legal counsel. I mean, having access to legal decisions inside an organization. I think ChatGPT will allow us to ask questions and get reasonable answers, first level answers to these sorts of things. I'm excited by the changes in education as to how we design learning so that people can use these amazing tools, but also have a definitely human role on top of that. So there's lots. I mean, I think your car is going to come with an onboard manual that you'll be able to talk to, and that will not be something that's been hard coded, but it'll be something that will be powered by ChatGPT lookalikes that allow you, for example, to interrogate your car and to interrogate the things you need to do to fix it or to change it or whatever. So I think lots of stuff.
So now I would like to bring the conversation more about for the people. And I think a lot of these technologies, they had the promise that it was going to help people, but some of them, it didn't happen that way. So something that is happening a lot, everyone is talking about having organizations being people-centric.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of perspectives there. I would like to ask you, what do you think genuinely means a people-centric organization?
I think it starts with consumers and customers, but it extends to your workforce and your relationship with suppliers and providers and everybody. So it's an ecosystem. And I think what we need to get much better at, and what most organizations need to get much better at, is really listening and hearing from the different stakeholders that are around a particular problem. So that might be understanding my customers better. It might be spending some more time listening to employees, surfacing ideas from inside our organization. I think whatever we're doing, it's about genuinely empathizing with the people that we are working with, working for, and the larger ecosystem, not just our own organization, but all the people we affect. It's very easy for all of us to fall into the trap of simply talking the language of change. So what we do is we say we're more agile, we say we're more customer-centered, we say we're digital, but we're not really. All right, all we've done is we've changed the language, but not the actions, and I think that's a very common phenomenon. I mean, I remember working with an insurance company in Indonesia, in Jakarta, and they absolutely celebrated the things you were supposed to be if you were a transformed company, and there was absolutely no sign of it that any of it had stuck. Of course, we're consumer-centric. Oh, you said, what does that mean? How do you demonstrate you're consumer-centric? Well, I want to hear the voice of the customer in everything that you do. I want to be able to see that the customer has access into the organization. The customer's views have access. I want to see that you don't take data from the company, from the consumer, and use it without their permission. So you're responsible in the way that you work with the consumer. So consumer-centricity, you need to demonstrate that you really mean it, not that you've just learnt to talk about consumer-centricity.
So based on what you observe, then how do you envision moving forward to the future, like organizations building that people-centric organizations?
It starts at the top and it starts at the bottom, right? So at the top of the organization, I think you need to make proper commitments and demonstrations that you understand what change means. But you also need to reach out to the bottom of your organization, to the other parts of the organization, and help empower those people. We did some work with DBS, which I really, really liked, which was what was called a digital jam. And what DBS did for a whole week was to listen to their employees. They told their employees things, they ran sessions and things like that, but for a whole week they also listened, and they provided electronic forums, and they provided work with your boss sessions where people did that. But for a whole week they spent time going out and re-meeting the workforce and discovering both the opportunities and the pain points that the organization was facing. It was brilliant, wonderful, great fun to be part of as well.
So you talk a lot about not just like listening, but also ask questions.
Yes,
right?
yes, of course, yes.
So now let's get practical. So if I'm a CEO of a company, what are some practical actions that you think I can do in order to achieve a human-centric organization?
That's such a big question. I think you start by identifying the ways in which you're perhaps not as customer focused or as agile or as digital as you perhaps need to be. So I think some sort of stock taking that says, where are we? Well, let's look at our competitors. Look at our market. I think I would go out and talk to a few customers, talk to a few staff randomly through the organization in order to be able to understand, well, how are you seen? I would look, I'd look for some indicators that things might not be good. I mean, if you've got high staff turnover, if you're constantly scrabbling for people to recognize your brand, or if you're seeing stuff that you think, oh, I should fix that, probably you should. So I think firstly a stock take of some sort. I think then it's about taking the leadership. It could be leadership at any level of an organization, and thinking through, how do we give these people an experience? How do we create an immersive experience which says, let's transport these people into the future. Let's take them to 2030 and ask them, what does our company look like in 2030? What does our organization look like? What does our school look like? What does our university look like? How have things changed? I think that sort of futuring activity can be hugely valuable. And then thinking, okay, there's probably a set of possibilities as to how things change. What we need to then do is to say, well, how do we go to the ones that we like, and how do we stop the ones we don't like of the possibilities? I think getting people hands-on with digital technology and asking people at different parts of an organization to say, well, what happens? Just imagine that we are going to work in the metaverse. What would that feel like? What happens if we are going to use AI in our thinking? What happens if we're going to use agility? What happens if we become more transparent in the way we use data and the way we talk to each other in the organization? I think it's going through some of those exercises and learning from them. I think actually one thing I mustn't lose is the idea that this is, you've got to be able to make a commitment to go on a very, very long journey. Transformation isn't something that's going to take you a year or 2 years or 6 months. It's something you're now going to be doing forever. And that's perhaps really uncomfortable to lots of people in lots of organizations. The idea that there's a sort of open-ended commitment to change. But I think without that sort of open-ended commitment, you're going to be buffeted by the next change in technology, by the next pandemic, by the next supply chain crisis, whatever it is. So I think we need to become genuinely more change aware. We need to be able to deal with change. Change has always happened. It's not. People say that change has never been faster than it is now. I'm not sure that's true. I'm sure there's always been change, but the companies that have survived, the companies that have thrived in change, are those that embrace it and listen to it and experiment and try things out. And I think that's what every organization needs to do.
And how are you helping organizations today?
I'm having tremendous fun working with smart people who have puzzles in their heads about how change might happen. So we're doing some work with the Ministry of Higher Education in Iceland. And there's a really, really smart minister, Minister of Higher Education. And she said, she can see change happening. I now need some people to think that through with me. So we're working with her on looking at how you design experiments, how you think through the future, how you implement change, how you build a culture of change, how you let every single voice in the department work. And so I think that's the sort of job I really like. The Coca-Cola work we did, very, very similar. You know, Coca-Cola came to us and said, we're running this event. We've got some very high-profile speakers. We're spending lots of money on the event. It's going to be great, but we'd like to ground it. We'd like to make sure that every single person in this event goes away with practical things that they can do that can change. So one of the things we did was we built a toolkit so that everybody could actually not just have an excellent 1.5 day experience, but they could then go away and try things out with their team. They could take things further and start that journey of change.
I really like that about just you learn by doing, right?
Definitely.
And I think it's something that it comes across.
That's me.
Exactly.
Learning by trying, learning by experimenting, learning by failing.
Yeah.
All right. Just learning.
So good. Such a fantastic conversation. But we're coming to the end. But before ending, I have a special question for you. You already started laughing. So people ask you a lot of questions, but maybe what is one question that no one has asked you before and you would love to answer?
I think I like questions that I'm not prepared for, and you've been good at asking me things that are not quite left field. I think that. How do you make sense of this? How do you put together a model in your head of all the things that are out there at the moment? How do you make the connections? I think that's the question that people don't ask, and I suppose that might be the one I should try and answer, which is that I think for all of my life I've avoided being in one particular discipline. I've always tried to go out into other disciplines and understand how other people look at the world, making connections between how other people do stuff. We 3-4 years ago we wrote a murder mystery, okay, and that murder mystery was in order to teach people about data. I wanted people to have an immersive experience around understanding around data. And we thought, well, the best way of doing this is to create some sort of data problem. What better data problem than a murder mystery? So I don't know very much about murder mysteries. I read a few, and then I read a book on forensics, and then I looked at police procedures, and I then started to imagine what we would need. So it's finding those connections. It's getting out of my comfort zone. My comfort zone is learning, and my comfort zone is digital. And going out and reading about forensics was fantastic. A completely fresh look. How do forensic experts, how do the police, how do criminologists think about crime? I've done another one recently, which was thinking about robbing banks. Or, no, not literally robbing banks, but thinking about cybersecurity. Yeah. So one of the big things that people are asking is, cybersecurity, huge new priority for many organizations as part of transformation. Well, you could go on a course in which you learn about, the 7 major routes to fraud inside banks, and yeah, you could just imagine the PowerPoint slides and the things like that. Or we could work together to build an immersive experience in which you experience why cybersecurity is important. I ran such an event with some students about 6 or 8 months ago, and we gave them the task of how they would plan a scam, and they went away and they spent some time building every part of that scam and looking how easy it is to get access to the software and whatever. That was the best learning experience about cybersecurity, because it immediately confronted these people with just how easy it is. And instead of telling them how easy, we showed them how it was. They showed themselves by building something. So that's what I like doing. It's making those connections. It is piecing things together, putting a puzzle together is what I'm about.
And today, in this world of uncertainty, I think a leader really needs to ask better questions, listen more, and be more agile on putting all that pieces together.
But
right?
get out of your leadership chair, and go and spend time both in your own industry with your customers, and also look at what's happening in other industries. One of the best ways of understanding how change is happening is not to look at your own industry and your own competitors, but to get out and look at what's happening in other industries. If you're in education, go and look at law. If you're in advertising, go and look at farming. It's making those connections that I think is so powerful.
Well, I think we could continue the conversation. I think we had long hours to talk. Yeah. But it was a pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it too.
Thank you.